everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode is practice blocks, why to make them and what to do with them. But before we get to the episode, let's get to my opinion. I'm going to talk about cutting instructions. I saw some pretty egregious cutting instructions on some videos this past week. And if you recall, if you saw one of my earliest videos, I talked about for successful quilting, you need accurate cutting, accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, and good pressing. And in the video that I saw this past week, a woman correctly stated that you need to make sure that you have a 90-degree angle on your fabric before you cut your first strip. That's true. And when I showed you in my video, I said line up a line on your ruler on the fold of the fabric and then cut to even out the fabric. If you're a right-hander, if you're a left-hander, you're on the other side, flip it over and cut. In these instructions, the woman laid the ruler on the edge of the fabric and said cut off a little bit on the side to get it straight. Well, how do you know that's straight? Nothing is lined up down here. Just to make it so you could see it, I drew a black line on here so you could see. Now I take another ruler and I lay it with a line lined up on the fold of the fabric. And you can see, I drew a line here on this one too. So if I remove this now, you can see that her cut was here. And see how far my line is? Way over here. It's a good 1/2 inch apart. If you come up here, they meet. Almost meet exactly. So this cut that she would have taken off on this side did not give you a 90-degree angle. So please don't do that. If you don't want to cut over here on this side and flip to this side, you can always overcut your first strip. That will give you the exact same result. For example, if you're going to cut 2.5 inch strips, overcut something. Line one of the lines on the ruler on the fold of the fabric that's bigger than your strip you're going to cut, bigger than 2.5. Cut, take that strip, flip it over, then do your accurate 2.5 inch measurement and cut. That gives you the exact same result as the way I showed in my original episode. The second thing I saw that I about died at was she needed to cut an 8.5 inch strip. And she said, well, if you only have one ruler, use your ruler on its side and put your 8.5 inch mark. Let's see, I have this upside down. Put your 8.5 inch mark on your line and then just take your rotary cutter and move up with the ruler. That is not going to get you an accurate cut. First of all, your ruler shouldn't move that easily. If it moves that easily, you're not getting accurate cuts at all. When you put your ruler down, it shouldn't move. It should stay there. The correct way to get an 8.5 inch cut when you have a 6.5 inch ruler is to use a second ruler. Now I realize she said if you only have one ruler. If you're going to quilt, you have to have the proper equipment. And if you only have 2 rulers, it would be your 8.5 by 24 and your 12.5 inch square ruler. These are the 2 rulers you would take with you if you were going to get shipwrecked on a desert island. The correct way to get to 8.5 is to come from an edge that has been squared up, which if you remember, which you should, because you probably all do it already anyway. This was not yet squared up, so I'm just going to make a straight cut here, and you stay on the side that the opposite-handed person would normally cut on. So the left-handers cut over here, we righties cut over here. You're going to stay on this side for now. You take your 12.5-inch ruler and you lay your 8.5-inch mark, on the edge, cut edge of your fabric. I try to get it about centered, and then you take your longer ruler and butt it up against it, and you can also still make sure that a line is even with the fold of the fabric. You remove your bigger ruler and then you cut. 8.5-inch strip. This is the proper way to cut a strip that's wider than your 6.5-inch width ruler. Okay, enough of the cutting. Let's get to today's episode. Real quick, before we get to the episode, I know people are going to ask about the quilt behind me. I only put it here for decoration, for you to have something pretty to look at. It's a Hunter Star done with Deb Tucker's methods. I'm a huge Deb Tucker fan, and I just love making her quilts. So please enjoy. Practice blocks. Why do you want to make them? And what can you do with them? Practice blocks are made for basically two different reasons. One is to make an actual quilt, in which case you would be testing your fabric choices, make sure there's no mistakes in the pattern, make sure you understand the pattern, and to make sure you're not making a mistake following the instructions of the pattern. Please don't cut out a whole quilt before you've made a test block. Why do I say that? Exhibit 1. This is fabric all cut for a quilt that one of my customers cut out, and then she decided she didn't want to make that block. She didn't like it. She was going to throw it all away. I said, oh, no. You're not going to throw that away. I will make a Project Linus quilt with it. To be honest, I probably have 5 or 6 Project Linus quilts here in this. A lot of work to get these made into something, but I just couldn't bear to have it thrown away. So please, cut out one block, put it together, see if you like it, and then you have a correct block to look at as a guide as you're making the rest of the quilt. In that case, you don't have to come up with anything to do with the quilt, with the block. It goes in your quilt, no problem. If you make a wrong block, but it's still pretty, just doesn't work in your quilt, you want to find something to do with it. In other cases, we make a block to test a tool, to learn a new technique. As I said, I'm a big Deb Tucker fan, so I oftentimes have my staff make blocks to learn a tool, learn a technique. Because the more they know how to use the tools and techniques, the more they can explain them to customers. This is one that one of my employees made, and it's from Deb Tucker's Blockbuster series. It's number 9. It's from 2016. I don't know what number she's up to. It's in the 50s or 60s of free block patterns that you can download. You go to studio180design.net. This is number 9, and it teaches the V block, which is here, which is also Peaky and Spike by Doreen Speckman. And also it uses the Tucker trimmer. Here are combo units in the corner, and here's an hourglass in the middle. So it gives real good experience to learn both of those tools. Now, one of the things that she said after she made it was, I wish that I had put the blue and the green in the center and the pink and the yellow in the corners. And I said, that's exactly why you make a practice block. So it really tests out your color placement as well as learning the tools. Now, this block was made by another employee, and she was testing out fussy cut Lemoynes. And she didn't really worry too much about getting each one of the diamonds exactly the same, because she was really just practicing to learn the technique, and that was fine. But I don't know if you can see on camera really well, but there's two animals, a bunny and a sheep. And she's got two bunnies together here and two sheep together here, when in fact you really wanted them to alternate. And what she kind of missed a little bit on the instructions is there's an A pile and a B pile, and she got them a little bit mixed up. So this is a very good lesson to learn on one block. You wouldn't want to make a 32 block quilt with every single one of them mixed up a little bit. Really good lesson to learn. One block that I made to practice to see if I wanted to make a whole quilt of was this glazed donuts from Jaybird Quilts. And I made the first block here. It's humongous. I had no idea when I started the quilt that the block was going to be that big. I should have realized it just based on when I opened the pattern and started cutting, but it didn't dawn on me until I had it mostly made. But that's fine. It was a practice block. I then decided to make it smaller, so I made this sweet spring one. The problem with this one was that her Hexenmoor ruler that she used to make this quilt didn't have the lines for this size on it. I still used it. I put some tape on the ruler and I made it work. It's very nice. It's still a little big. I made it again, smaller. This used 2.5-inch strips, which I have a multitude of. And I used, instead of her Hexenmoor ruler, I used her tiny little mini hex ruler. And I really like this. I like the smallest size the best. I find that I do oftentimes like smaller things better. And now I have a box with a lot of pieces cut and a couple blocks made. I'm going to hopefully finish it one day. Keeps getting pushed aside for other projects at the present time. But it's a cute block, and after making the third one, I did decide, in fact, I do want to make it. This is a winter piece that I made. I'd asked Linda, who works for me, to pick out a Deb Tucker technique sheet to make something winter. And this is the one she chose, Diamond 4-Patch Wedge. And I take one look at it and I say, oh, great. She picked a 5-star difficulty technique for me to learn. And actually, it came together so well. Her instructions are so good. Her pressing instructions are always good, telling you which way to press so everything nests. Everything really came together beautifully. You can probably find a couple here that don't meet exactly perfectly, but for the most part, I was very pleased with it. It is a little on the large size, but that's all right. We'll have something to do with this one. This is Deb Tucker's Cyclone. We made this as a spring piece to put out as a little decoration. And we always enjoy making these. We want to use good fabric, because when we practice a technique, if you use your junk fabric, like I did to show you the cutting, then you don't want to make anything out of it. If you use good fabric that you like, then you can make something with it and enjoy it. But we like this, the Cyclone. It uses the Tucker trimmer. And so that's just another use for Deb's Tucker trimmer ruler. But it makes a beautiful piece. You could make a whole quilt of this. We made one block. And lastly, we have her Twisted Wedge Star. And I made this a Valentine's Day theme. And it's not made into anything yet, but it will be. But it's just another example of taking something, learning a technique, and ending up with a block. And what do we do with it? I will be showing you. Lastly, we had one of my employees make this, and it uses the shaded 4 patch, which again is the Tucker trimmer. If you don't have one, we highly suggest that you get one. It has so many uses. But this is the shaded 4 patch, and these are hourglass units. And my employee picked gorgeous fabric, I thought, and I think it just turned out absolutely beautifully. Now, on most of Deb's patterns, I don't put corners on the edge. If you look back at the Twisted Wedge Star, the last one I showed you, she puts corners on the unit that I have here to make it square. Well, I usually leave those corners off so it stays octagonal or hexagonal, depending on which block it is. In this case, it is a definite square. So how do I make it octagonal or hexagonal? Well, you can't make it a hexy. So that means you have to make it octagonal. And how did I do that? These pieces on the end here are a 135-degree angle, and that will give you your hexagonal shape. The angle that is 135 degrees is the opposite angle on a diamond. So I grabbed my Creative Grids 45-degree diamond ruler. These are 45 degrees. So you have left 135 here. So I simply took a strip of fabric and laid this ruler on the strip and cut it so that I had the correct shape. And I put it on as a border, and now I have the octagonal shape. So what are we going to do with our practice blocks? You know I hate waste. We have to use them. We have to make them into something. I think the thing most of you know and do already is put your practice blocks into the back of your quilt. This is the quilt I showed you before, the old Trudy Hughes pattern that I just love. I think it's absolutely gorgeous, but I couldn't decide on what colors to use where. So I kept making practice blocks. I made so many practice pieces, and I cut extra fabric because I didn't know what I was making. So I took all the extra fabric and extra blocks, practice blocks, and put them into the back of the quilt. I think a lot of people already know to do that. What else can we do? Well, I've got 4 extra blocks from a Project Linus quilt, and I've got it layered and ready to practice machine quilting. It's all well and good to practice your machine quilting on a solid piece of fabric, but most of the times you're going to be quilting pieced blocks. So it's really good to practice on pieced blocks. Now, I've seen people make quilts on their YouTube videos for their dogs. So certainly this could be made into an animals quilt, or I see it probably as an American Girl doll quilt. And it would turn out really cute, I think. Now, what else can you do? Well, it could be a practice block, or in this case, it's an orphan block. This is Elizabeth Hartman's giraffe from Spectacular Savannah, and I had made 2 giraffes and 2 zebras because that was my original thought process on designing the quilt. Well, when I finally finished the quilt, I only used 1 zebra and 1 giraffe. So I found this fabric, old fabric in the store, so I didn't feel bad using it, and made it into a tote. And I think it could be a perfect tote for my daughter, who's a 3rd grade teacher. So here's another use for an orphan block, or it could be a practice block. Make it into a tote bag. Super simple, no zippers, nothing, just handles, no button, just a plain old tote bag. What most of the things that I've showed you that I'm going to do is make a candle mat. What's a candle mat, you say? A candle mat is something that's bigger than a mug rug and smaller than a table topper. That in-between size. Do you always have to put candles on it? Of course not. The one at home that I have, I put a lamp on it, but put a bowl on it, put a vase of flowers on it, put whatever you want on it. Now, many of you know I hate binding, but I do want to get better at my machine quilting. So I'm going to show you how I take one of the smaller pieces that we've made and turn it into a candle mat. So now I'm going to turn the little piece that I made into a candle mat. And I layer it together with just regular cotton batting. It's not going to be a hot pad, so it doesn't need any Insulbright. And I'm going to layer it with a backing that I'm going to bring up and finish the raw edge so I don't have to do binding. I'm going to show you the 2 Bernina feet that I cannot live without. And if you are a Bernina owner, be sure you get the Bernina Foot app at the App Store. It's obviously free. It lets you keep track of what feet you have and what you don't have. So when you go to the store and somebody tells you that this foot you absolutely must have, you can check your phone and see if you have it or not. And also, it will keep you abreast of any specials that are going on. So be sure to do that. So now I'm using the 20D foot, and I love this foot. It is wide open so that you can see the needle and where it's going down into your fabric. And while Bernina does not recommend you using this foot for a straight stitch, because this is all open, so there's not as much holding the fabric down, I find that this works great for stitching in the ditch. I've always thought that stitching in the ditch was one of the hardest things to do. And if you do this, be sure you put your straight stitch plate on so that it mitigates some of the wiggle room. That is why Bernina does not recommend you using a straight stitch with it. And be sure you tell your machine that you have the 0mm plate on so that if you try to do a zigzag, it won't let you, because if you were able to, you'd break a needle. So I go very, very slow, but I do love that I can see with an unobstructed view where my needle is going in. And I'm not going to make you watch me do this for too long. I find it excruciating to watch somebody else sew when I'm walking on the treadmill and I want to sew. But I get to the corner here, and now I keep my hands up here. Be sure you use your knee lift, your freehand system, to turn your work, and then you can continue on down, making sure you're staying in the ditch. Now you can do as much or as little quilting as you like. You can practice your free motion. Obviously, you change your foot and drop your feed dogs. But just do as much quilting as you want. So now let's move over to my piece that is already quilted and ready to go. Now here's a piece that I have all quilted, and now it's ready to finish. So after it's quilted, I cut the batting even with the edge all the way around, and then I cut the backing to 1 inch all the way around. Now this is a hexagon, so I would do 3 opposite sides first, clip them, and then do the other 3 sides. So this is my last side. So I take the edge, fold it in a half, and I would be at the ironing board to do this. And I would press this and then bring this up, and I would use my clips to hold it in place. If it was an octagon, you do the 4 alternate sides, fold them in half, up, press, and then do the remaining 4 sides, and you get these pretty nice pretty nice corners there. So now I have to take off my 20D foot and put on my 10D foot. And I also have to take my straight stitch plate off because I need to move my needle position over a little bit. So I put my zigzag plate on. I come up, tell the machine, oops, that's the wrong button. Tell the machine I have the 9mm plate on. I put my 10D foot on. And now I'm ready to sew. I'm going to move my needle position over a couple clicks. And you can see the guide here. We're going to put that right on the edge of the fabric. I'm going to put my foot down. And off I go. I'm just going to go to the corner here and then pull it out so you can see what it looks like. I can't live without this foot. I just love it. Even if your piece isn't straight, because of the guide, the stitching is the same distance from the edge. All right, I'm going to stop this and pull it out and bring it up to the camera so you can see how beautiful this is. There's my stitching right at the edge of the fabric. So it holds this down and you don't have to bind it. What's better than a little piece you don't have to bind? So that's our episode today. Practice blocks, why to make them, and what to do with them. Please don't cut out a whole quilt before you make a practice block. Thanks. See you next time.